I'm going to run this review a little bit like a show and tell in places. So we'll start with this. This is the Bluesound NODE X. It's a new streaming DAC from Bluesound. Sometimes that's called a network streamer, sometimes it's called a streaming DAC, sometimes it's called a network bridge. And we can connect it to a pair of, I guess, active loudspeakers using the RCAs on the back, or that can be connected to a power amplifier, or even an integrated amplifier or a preamplifier. And then we have a digital output if we want to connect it to an external DAC, or we can use the internal DAC to decode streams. Now the streams for this thing can be controlled using the partnering BlueOS app. Oh, and the internal DAC also feeds the headphone socket on the front. Now the NODE X sells for €799 in Europe. That's a full $200 more than the previous Node. You can see that this one comes in a silver finish and it's a limited edition. How limited, we don't know, but I guess this classifies as FOMO-fi.
This episode is brought to you by Made by Music, the new podcast from Darko.Audio.
So I've been using a Bluesound Node on and off since the 2i was issued in about 2018. And then 2021, Bluesound sent me this. This is the N130 edition, or the 2021 edition. And I've been using that ever since, although my 2i version I still use in Berlin. And what I love about this is how easy it is to set it up, and it gives me very speedy access to Spotify Connect, Tidal Connect, Room Ready and AirPlay. And I really like the touch panel glass plate on the top that gives me volume control, also a Red Hot Chili Peppers button over here, and the presets. And another feature that I really love, and I don't think enough products have it as part of their feature set, is HDMI eARC input. And I think reasonably special for a network streamer at this price point is the subwoofer output on the back. So yeah, this is $599. The NODE X I just showed you is $799. One of the reasons that I haven't reviewed this in the past, I think, and also the 2i by association, is that I'm not that crash hot on its sound quality. I don't love what comes out of the red and white RCA sockets here. It's okay, but it sometimes sounds a bit congealed and a bit soft and a bit veiled. And what I've usually done with this Node and the 2i is partner it with an external DAC. So using the external outputs on the back. So we've got a coax output, we've got an optical output, and I've just had those feed an external DAC. Now in Berlin, I've tended to use a Chord Mojo, or more recently a Chord Mojo 2. Here in Lisbon, I've used an RME ADI2 DAC FS. Is that what it's called? Actually, I have it here. Yes, the ADI2 DAC FS. I had it right. So for 2023, we have the NODE X. It's very similar in terms of build and functionality to the N130 Node. All the connectivity along the back is the same as the N130. It's got the same glass top plate on the top. Somebody did ask me, is it metal? No, it's not. This is still plastic, I assume, so that the Wi-Fi functionality can still work. However, Bluesound have made 3 key changes to the NODE X. The first is they've swapped out the DAC circuit from a TI/Burr-Brown based DA conversion circuit to an ESS Labs based DA conversion circuit. Notice I'm emphasizing circuit here and not DAC chip, because it's not just the DAC chip that makes the DAC sound as it does, it's the whole circuit. And then on the front, you'll probably notice that the headphone socket here is now a 6.4mm or 1/4 inch socket, whereas on the previous versions it was 3.5mm. So I quite like that. I much prefer a 1/4 inch headphone socket for home use. And behind this socket is an all new headphone amplifier circuit, and it's made by THX, and it's called an AAA circuit. And I think the main idea behind the THX AAA amplifier circuit is lower distortion and a higher signal to noise ratio. With the NODE X, we now get a infrared remote control wand. This is the same remote I think that we get with the NAD M10 V2. Now, in order to put the Node X through its paces and do a side-by-side comparison in terms of sound quality with the 2021 Node, I built a Tidal playlist. Grace Jones, David Morley, PJ Harvey, Giant Sand, Capricorn, Björk, Lindstrom, Prefab Sprout, Primal Scream, Tricky, Sparks, Blauan, Clark and Tom York, Brian Eno, John Cale and more Giant Sand. And I used this playlist with the Node X hooked up to the Enleum AMP-23R amplifier and had that driving a pair of Zoo Soul 6. And then obviously I listened to the same playlist again, but with the N130 or 2021 Node in the driving seat and took notes as I went. And then I did the same A-B comparison by taking the AMP-23R out of the picture and the Zoos out of the picture and just did some headphone listening. And I used two different sets of headphones for this. I used the final D8000 Pro and the Meze 109 Pro. And it was pretty obvious to me from even the first, 30 seconds of the Grace Jones track, which was the 12-inch hot-blooded version of Slave to the Rhythm. It was obvious that the Node X gives us a better, more transparent look at the layer separation in that track, because that's a very densely populated track in terms of things going on. And yeah, the Node just peeled it apart more carefully and more delicately. I think with the previous Node, the 2021 version, everything sounds a little bit more congealed. But once again, these are audiophile differences, so they are this and not this. They're definitely not night and day. And the Node X also lends more dynamic punch to tracks like 20 Hertz by Capricorn, which is a classic ambient techno/techno track that was released on R&S Records back in the 90s, but I think is now enjoying a second life with a bunch of new remixes, which I'm not really a fan of, to be honest. But it's more acoustic fare, like PJ Harvey's The Words That Maketh Murder, that I think really benefits from the Node X's superior, I guess, A, transparency and B, layer separation. And that's especially true when listening to that kind of music through the Node X's headphone socket and comparing it to the 2021 Node's headphone socket. The 2021 Node really isn't in the race here, I don't think. I think the delta actually between the headphone sockets is wider than the analog outputs on the back, which I thought was interesting. But most importantly of all, when going back to loudspeaker listening, so the Enleum amp and the Zoo loudspeakers, when I had the Node X in play, I didn't once feel the need to add an external DAC to it, whereas I generally almost always do with the 2021 Node. But let's not get too carried away here. I wouldn't say that the Node X's DAC, its internal DAC circuit, sounds as good as this RME DAC. But I think the Node X is closer to the RME than it is to the DAC found inside the 2021 Node. And if you ask me, and I guess if you're watching this video, you probably are asking me, I do think that the €200 uplift in price is worth it for the uplift in audible performance that the Node X brings to the table, especially if you're a headphone listener, but not just because you're a headphone listener, right? I still think the DAC outputting from the RCA sockets on the back is worth those $200 because it's not this destroys this, this blows this out of the water, but it's not a narrow delta either. We might just call it noticeable. The difference between the Node X and the 2021 Node when played through a sufficiently revealing hi-fi system is noticeable. Of course, the new Node X doesn't exist in a vacuum. And if you want even more layer separation from your digital audio streaming playback, especially behind headphones, or if you have headphones that really demand a lot of power, you might want to have a look. I'll pull this one up here. At this thing. This is called the R7. It's made by FiiO and it has a touch screen on the front. It's a bit like a DAP that runs on mains power, but it has balanced outputs on the back. It has an SD card slot, but there's no HDMI here. There's no subwoofer here. There's no bass management here as there is on the Node X. But this is well worth a look. I am going to make a video about the R7 very soon. But I would say that this does sit in many ways on par with the Node X. In some particular audible aspects, I think it's better than the Node X. but functionally it's a very different animal. So you'll need to hang tight for my video if you're kind of torn between the Node X and this. Now, I know I'm going to get asked this in the comments, so I'll cover it now. You might be wanting to know, why should I buy a Node X or even a 2021 Node instead of a Sonos Port? And it's a good question, and it's a fair question, especially when it comes to the 2021 Node, which sells for similar money to the Port. Let's tackle functionality first. The Sonos will give you access to more streaming services than the Bluesound. Inside the BlueOS app, there is a whole slew of integrations possible for a whole bunch of different streaming services, but it cannot match Sonos's much broader selection. However, if you buy the Sonos and not the Bluesound, you will not get a headphone output. You won't get a subwoofer output with bass management that splits the signal accordingly. I've covered this in the past. You won't get an HDMI eARC input either. And you won't get two-way Bluetooth. So that means you can Bluetooth into the Node, but you can also Bluetooth out of it should you so wish. And I guess this is a bit of a killer for audiophiles. From a Sonos, you won't get support for high-res audio higher than 48 kilohertz. And the Nodes go much higher. They go to 24,192, and you get multi-room support for that high-res audio streaming. And if you're sensing a bit of vagueness from me on this issue, it's because I'm not really a high-res audio user, not at all. I'm very happy with CD quality audio. But you might feel differently, and that's fine. So just know that the Bluesound Node X and the Node 2021 edition are both high-res capable, and the Sonos Port is not. But of course, not being in possession of a Sonos Port makes it impossible for me to say whether or not the Node X or the 2021 Node sounds better or worse than the Port. However, I would be amazed if the Port bested the sound quality of the Node X. But yeah, I can't possibly tell you because I don't have them here for a side-by-side comparison. However, if you live in Europe and you live near a hi-fi Clubben store, you can go and find out for yourself because they have both the Port and the Nodes on the shelf. So as we limp towards a conclusion, how about we pick up a sort of audio-visual analogy that I used with the Wharfedale Linton video. In that, I would say that the 2021 Node, the white one here, is a bit like a 1080p image. And that the Node X, the silver one, is a bit like a 4K image. And then this FiiO leans toward, but doesn't go all the way to, an 8K image. But not everybody is going to like that degree of resolution and separation. In fact, I think the Node X sounds a little bit more together, whereas I think this thing goes crazy with layer separation. So if you love that kind of thing, then you're going to be in hog heaven with the FiiO network streamer. But with the Bluesound, I think it's more of the middle ground between the more congealed 2021 Node and the FiiO. And I think a lot of people will prefer that more coherent presentation. So yeah, moving forward, I'm going to keep the Node X around here, and maybe later this month, I'm going to put one on my Patreon to give away as part of a competition, a game of skill, not a game of chance. Thank you very much. But yeah, I'm going to use the Node X probably more often than the 2021 Node, because usually when I'm in Berlin with the 2021 Node, what I do to get my sort of degree of audible satisfaction from the system into which I drop this, I almost always pull out the Chord Mojo 2 and use it as an external DAC for this. I don't think, I'm guessing here because this is audio memory and it's wholly unreliable, so take from this what you will. I don't think the Node X is up to Chord Mojo 2 levels of DA conversion, but it's not as far away as it is from the predecessor. So I'll be much happier to hook up the Node X into a hi-fi system either here or back in Germany, but without the need for an outboard DA converter. And I think that speaks volumes. Anyway, if you liked this video, if you found it informative or entertaining or a bit of both, then please consider giving us a like down below. If you like my attitude towards high-end audio coverage and yeah, just waving things around in front of the camera, then please consider subscribing to this channel also below. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching.